Alright, we are almost live. Any second now. Just need this thing to connect. Okay, cool. Good evening, everybody. I am BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. I use green screen effects and other graphics to make silly little Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. And tonight, we're doing some live deck building. I saw this little Tevel, the balance scale got spoiled from the upcoming Tarkir set coming out. We got ourselves a little Spirit Dragon here, and our Spirit Dragon's got an attack trigger. Tevel is a flying 4/4 Dragon Spirit that says whenever this thing attacks, we mill 3 cards, and then we can return a land card from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. The land doesn't have to be one of the cards we milled this way off the Tevel's trigger. And when I saw my new best friend Tevel right here, the very first card I thought about was this here Blossoming Tortoise. Blossoming Tortoise has a very similar trigger to Tevel, but I kind of think the Turtle's better, because our friend Turtle, Blossoming Tortoise, says that whenever they enter or attack, we mill 3 cards, and then we can put a land from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. A lot like Tevel. Tevel has a second triggered ability, though, that says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a little 2/2 black zombie creature token. I love this thing. This thing's going to be the face of the Soul Tie Dragon Precon that's coming out alongside this set. There's 5 precons coming out alongside this set. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Infinite Arc Runner. Okay, Infinite Arc Runner got our very first suggestion within Adrix and Nev. So Adrix and Nev, quintessential Simic token doubler. They are merfolk, they are twins, and they were part of a precon. They are blue, they are green, they are 4 mana. I think they got ward or something. Yeah, they got ward too, and they're doubling season on a Simic creature. This thing says if you 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, you just make twice that many. So you can get this doubling season commander for $7 American for a foil version, and the foil versions are going to be very plentiful because, again, printed in a precon originally. This thing's very cool. Thank you, Infinite Arc Runner. This thing is going to help us make double the amount of little 2/2 black zombies off our commander's trigger. Good suggestion, especially because this trigger says whenever 1 or more cards would leave your graveyard. So even if we remove several cards at once, we're only ever going to make 1 zombie off it, but this will double it. Very cool. Very, very cool. So the way that this zombie trigger right here on Tevel is worded, we want to be mindful. We don't want to be recurring large waves of creatures if we really want to capitalize on that zombie token creation trigger. We want to be taking out 1z, 2z's at a time, kind of like with Tevel's trigger. Or that Blossoming Tortoise trigger we saw earlier. Thank you, Infinite Arc Runner, for the suggestion. Vash, good to see you, Vash. You want us to run Captain the Garthrod. Captain the Garthrod is a Mind Flayer. It's from the Mind Flayers, Horrors and Pirates precon that came out in the Baldur's Gate expansion. This little 5-drop Demir 3/6 horror pirate says that horrors we control got menace, and that whenever a horror we control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. 10 out of 10. He himself is a horror. We got a lot of horrors in this color identity, in this wedge of Soul Tie of black, green, and blue. Very cool. What does this other thing do? He gives us an end step trigger. Choose target artifact or creature card that was put into an opponent's graveyard. That was put in there from anywhere their library. Okay. At the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn. Put it onto the battlefield. Okay, cool. I have definitely lost to our friend Captain Nagarthrod. He's definitely really good at recurring other people's creatures, and you can definitely build him in that direction. The precon is like a split between recurring opponents' creatures out of their graveyard and horrors. Captain Nagarthrod was also a precon. Thank you very much for the follow, Avarish. Arval, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and we're doing some community deck building tonight. If you want to suggest any cards for this recently spoiled Tevel, the balance scale, please put them in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. Oh, of course we're going to run that doubling season in Infinite Arc Runner. Also, good to see you, a guy that exists. If you guys want to learn how to break the game, please check out my friend and heterosexual brother in Christ, a guy that exists. He's a guy that exists. Please remind me, how long have you been doing content on TikTok again? The guy that exists does, he helps you build decks. He tells you how to break commanders. He's very cool. He's also pretty handsome. He's got a nicely shaped beard. Check him out. This is doubling season. It's a $35, even though it just got a reprint in Foundations. 5 mana, green enchantment, and this thing says if an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, we're making twice that many tokens, and the same is true for counters we would put on ourselves or permanents. This thing's crazy. It keeps getting reprinted, and it stays really expensive, y'all. This card's very cool. Not every deck really wants to have a doubling season, though, so maybe check out a proxy before you do this $35 investment. Thank you very much for the follow, Baddest312. I appreciate it. All right, what's our next suggestion? All right, so a guy that exists. He's been doing TikTok MTG content for 2 years now. Li forever. Yeah, dude, it's crazy that you sit through my entire videos. Thank you for doing that, by the way. Muldrotha, oh my gosh. All right, Muldrotha is capable of war crimes super easily. This is Muldrotha. Muldrotha simply, hands down period, is the best Sultai recursion commander. Recursion being a strategy where you're pulling things out of the graveyard. Muldrotha is a 6-drop elemental avatar that says during each of your turns you may play a land and cast a permanent spell of each permanent type from your graveyard. Muldrotha can make people really sad. Muldrotha really capitalizes on things that are able to sacrifice themselves to do things. What comes to mind when I think of Muldrotha is a card, Spore Frog, which is a fog that you can just keep recurring with Muldrotha, so people can't do combat damage to you. And also this nonsense called Pernicious Deed, which is a Golgari enchantment that can blow up the board every turn, and if you got Muldrotha, you can keep popping it out. Muldrotha has definitely traumatized me. Muldrotha's been out for, I think, 8 years, printed in the Return to Dominaria block. Came out around the same time as Avengers Infinity War, the first one. Oh, Scarab God! Zombie! Good to see you, Zombie! You want us to run that Scarab God? Let's talk about that Scarab God. Scarab God, originally printed in Hours of Devastation about 6 years ago, was a very pricey 5-mana Dimir zombie commander. This thing is a 5/5. It itself is a god. It's got a beginning of our upkeep trigger that each opponent loses X life, and we scry a chunky X, where X is the amount of zombies we control. We also got an activated ability where we can exile a creature card from a graveyard. Doesn't have to be our graveyard, it can be our opponent's graveyard. And we can create a top copy of it, except our copy is a zombie. So that's the Locust God. Locust God is very popular. He's seen a few reprints, so he's got his price down. That's really good. The Locust God used to hang out around 40 bucks once upon a time. I'm really glad that it's cheaper and that more people have access to him, because he is a very fun zombie commander if you want to take it in a zombie direction. He's especially synergistic in this Tevel that got spoiled from Tarkir last week, because Tevel makes these little zombies off the pulling stuff out of our graveyard trigger, and this thing makes creatures leave our graveyard as well. So the Scarab God's activated ability makes things leave the graveyard, giving us a Tevel trigger when we activate the Scarab God for 4. Very synergistic card. Very good include. Okay, Stank Boy. Stank Boy wants us to run that Hour of Eternity. Hour of Eternity. I'm not familiar with an Hour of Eternity. Sounds like it came out in the Hours of Devastation set. Probably the same thing as the Locust God. Oh, no, yeah, it sure did. All right, so in Hour of Eternity, we got XX 3 blue pips for a 50-cent sorcery that says exile X target creature cards from your graveyard, and for each card exiled this way, create a token that's a 4/4 zombie. 10 out of 10. So this is really cool. This could be a high mana end card for us. We are in a token strategy. We're trying to remove things from our graveyard. This stuff will remove a bunch of stuff from our graveyard. Also make zombies. This thing is going to be an excellent zombie commander, I'm realizing. This is secretly a zombie deck. This is so good in a zombie deck, actually. Tevel next zombie commander, maybe? Question mark? I feel like yes. Hell yeah. I can vibe. Yeah, oh, escape triggers. Oh yeah, escape does trigger it. Patriarch's Bidding. Assassin Guy Per. Okay, Patriarch's. Yeah, Patriarch's Bidding. That's a tribal card, right? I think it's that black tribal card. I think it's like a full-blown recursion. I can't spell. Okay. Patriar. Patriarch's Bidding. Patriars. Okay. Why is this so hard for me to spell today? Patriarch's Bidding. Patriarch's Bidding, we finally got to it. It's 5 mana, it's $4, it's a black sorcery. It says that each player chooses a creature type, and each player returns all creature cards of the type chosen this way from their graveyard to their battlefield. Okay, cool. We're gonna pick Zombie. We've already seen a few cards that care about zombies. A lot of zombies are good at removing themselves from graveyards. And whenever we remove something from a graveyard, we're gonna get a Tevil trigger. We're gonna make a little 2/2 zombie token. Does our zombie druid have a keyword? Nope, it's just a vanilla 2/2 zombie druid. But there are plenty of zombie tribal cards that can like probably slam Death Touch on there. Probably Menace in these colors would be really easily to give it to. Yeah, I feel like this thing's actually a zombie commander. March of the World Ooze. Oh, Possum wants us to run that March of the World Ooze. Is March of the World Ooze that new green card that came out in the Aether Drift? Yeah. Aether Drift, 6 mana, enchantment, mythic, $6. Creatures you control have base power and toughness 6/6 and are oozes in addition to their types. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, we make a little 3/3 green elephant, a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Okay, this card's a little tricky. It cares about types. It makes elephants, but it makes everything oozes. This is a little bit spicy. This is really cool. This just makes everything a 6/6, and we are going to be making a ton of 2/2 zombies off our Tevil triggers. So this thing is going to triple the power and toughness that we would normally put out if we were just making zombies off the Tevil trigger. This thing's very cool. It's $6. The art is very rad. You got a little slimy elephant, which is thematic because it makes elephants, makes everything oozes, makes elephant tokens. Very fun. All right. What else we got? What else we got? Arcane Adaptation. Arcane Adaptation. Arcane Adaptation is not... Okay, this thing. I have one of these hanging out in a binder. It's a 3-drop blue enchantment that came out in the Rivals of Ixalan expansion, the second Ixalan expansion. This thing says, when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. I feel like in our secret zombie deck, we're picking zombie. And creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other types, and the same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. Very cool. I like this a lot. We can, when I saw this deck, I did not think zombie deck, or excuse me, when I saw this commander, I wasn't thinking zombie commander. I was thinking graveyard recursion commander. So like the first card I pulled up when we opened the live was that Blossoming Tortoise, which has a similar trigger to Tevil's attack trigger to fill your graveyard and slam lands out for ramp. But this thing's very cool. I feel like we could definitely do both. And if we're running that Blossoming Tortoise and things that are outside of the zombie typal thing, this thing will just make them zombies and it'll fix them. And those 3/3 elephants that the March of the World Ooze makes, those could also be zombies with that thing out too. Very cool suggestion. Frostace! It's so good to see you, Frostace. How have you been? Sidisi? Is it Sidisi or is it Sidzi? I know which card. It's a snake lady. The snake's kind of hot in like a weird way. It is Sidisi. Okay. Sidisi, Brood Tyrant. 4 mana, Sultai Commander, 3/3 Naga Shaman. Whenever this thing enters the battlefield or attacks, we mill 3 cards. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Okay, I feel like Sidisi Blue Tyrant is just a better version of our commander. Okay, it's a 3/3, it doesn't fly compared to a 4/4, same amount of mana, they're both... Enters the battlefield or attacks. Okay, this thing's way better at filling the graveyard, but it doesn't pop lands out like Tevil's trigger does. And whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, create a 2/2 black. Okay, so they make different things. Sidisi wants to lean really hard into a self-mill strategy because she only makes zombies when stuff enters to the graveyard from the library, whereas Tevil makes 1 zombie at a time, but he can do it whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard. I like this a lot. They definitely want to be in each other's decks, in each other's 99s. They're very cool. Which do you guys think is better, in your opinion? I feel like Sidisi has a way higher ceiling because Sidisi can make more than 1 zombie at a time. That's my personal opinion. But I don't know, this thing could be a flying blocker, and sometimes that's all you need is a flying blocker to not die. Alright, a guy that exists It's not as good as Sidisi. It's not as good as Tevel for sure. Okay, check out my favorite commander, Yenna Redtooth Agent. I really hope that Yenna Redtooth Agent is in our color identity. Yenna Redtooth Agent is not in our color identity, unfortunately. Hello, everybody. I'm BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. We are doing some live deck building today, and if you want to suggest any cards for our Tevel the Balance Scale commander that we're looking at, because it got spoiled last week from the Tarkir block coming out this week. Excuse me, coming out this year. So yeah, put your suggestions in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list, and you can see what other people, other viewers watching this live would run in that deck. We got suggested a World Shaper by Zombie over on Twitch. World Shaper used to be a $12 card, and when at the time, I have only been playing Magic for a few years at that time, and I'm like, why the fuck is this $12? It was being played in the standard deck at the time, and I really didn't get it. And I have one of these in a binder, and I love graveyard strategies. I love filling my graveyard and getting value out of it. And I keep playing this thing, and I still don't get it. If you're an aristocrat strategy, and if you can instant speed, like, sacrifice this creature to an altar, I get it. But, like, in a general, just kind of, like, self-mill strategy, I'm still torn. How do you guys feel about World Shaper? It's a 4-drop Merfolk Shaman. It's $3. Whenever this thing attacks, we get to mill 3 cards, and when it dies, we get to return all the land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I would definitely run it in an aristocrat self-mill graveyard strategy, but I've played it. I've played with it for a few years now, and honestly, I don't know. I'm a little underwhelmed, personally. But I want to know how you guys must like it. Someone suggested it. Hermit. Oh my God, Hermit Druid. Is Hermit Druid the thing that, like, you only run a few lands or a few certain things? Hermit Druid, yep, this is the combo. This is the game-ending card right here. All right, this is a $7 2-mana little human druid. It's got an activated ability for a single green, and we tap this thing. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card. Put that card into your hand, and all their cards reveal this way into your graveyard. So, okay, this card reads as CEDH to me. The way that you abuse this card in a CEDH setting, I'm not a CEDH person. Please correct me if I'm wrong, chat. But they use this card and they don't run any basic lands, or they only run 1 or 2. They run a minimal amount of basic lands or none at all. And that way, when they get their Hermit Druid out and they get an activation off, they've put their deck in their graveyard. And once their entire library is in their graveyard, they do some kind of combo-y thing with the stuff in the graveyard to close out the game. That's been my experience with Hermit Druid. It feels like a combo card. It feels like a build-around card. If you're running the Hermit Druid for some kind of splashy, crazy play, you're not running a lot of basic lands, or you're running 0 basic lands. That's been my experience with this card. Not CEDH. Run Forest. You fill your graveyard for the effect. Check out Head Shredder. Head Shredder is an amazing card. So sometimes on nights where we don't have a lot of suggestions, I'll pull out cards that I want to talk about that I think will be good in the deck. Head Shredder is one of the cards I pulled out, and I really like Head Shredder. Head Shredder is a 5/5 little 4-drop green vehicle that came out in the Duskmourn expansion a few months ago in 2024. And this thing, whenever this thing attacks, you may mill 2 cards, and whenever 1 or more lands are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. So the thing about Head Shredder is, even if it's not attacking, it's still getting you value if your deck is meant to be filling your graveyard from your library, right? Yeah, so if you're doing self-mill strategies, this thing will still plop down free ramp for you as long as it hangs out on the battlefield. And if you're having a hard time milling stuff, you can crew it for 1. That's an aggressive crew cost. Crew for 1 for a 5/5. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. And then it can fill the graveyard, and if you hit lands, they get plopped directly onto the battlefield. I love this thing. It feels like a Blossoming Tortoise, and I sure do love that turtle. Okay, very good card. I really like the Head Shredder. I don't have any trepidation like I do with World Shaper in regards to Head Shredder. I like Head Shredder. Satan Croson. I'm sorry. I'm going to need a spell check on that. Do we have Spelunking yet? No, we don't have Spelunking yet. Okay, so Spelunking is a card that came out in the Caverns of Ixalan, and people are so hype on Spelunking. People love this thing. It's a 3-drop little enchantment with an ETB effect to draw a card, and then you can plop down a land from your hand onto the battlefield. If you put a cave onto the battlefield this way, you gain a chunky 4 life. But the real reason people are suggesting this card is this hero ability that lands you control enter the battlefield untapped. This thing goes great in a Gates deck, a Land Matters deck. It's a good card. It helps you not have your lands enter the battlefield tapped. It draws you at least one card when it enters, and sometimes if you have a land in your land to plop down when this thing enters, you're ramping a little bit too. I enjoy it. People are hyped about it. I'm not quite a spelunking truther yet. It's cool. It's functional. The Comic Tutor, thank you so much for the follow. I'm BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives, we do live deck building. Tonight, we're looking at Tevel because I saw the spoilers from last week from the Tarkir set coming out this year, and I wanted to talk about it because I love graveyard strategies. You want us to run an Oro, the Titan of Nature's Wrath zombie, kid me? Okay, I am not I am nothing but a casual commander player. I don't do CDH. Or like standard or any of the other formats. Oro, as I understood it, took over Arena for a long time when it was originally printed in Theros Beyond Death. It was a really popular card in Standard. It's aggressively costed value. It draws you, it ramps you. This is a 3-drop, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life, and you draw a card, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. That's great. That's kind of like spelunking, except you also get some life gain. This thing was balanced with the escape mechanic, which is that 4-drop activated ability that exile 5 other cards from your graveyard, and then you can plop this thing back on down to the battlefield. The trick about Oro, though, if he didn't escape, he sacrifices himself when he enters. So you get the trigger and he immediately dies. He's very cool. He's a good little piece of value. He himself going to the graveyard is great. In a Tevel deck, we can activate his escape because we're going to have a chunky graveyard. We want to fill that graveyard as much as possible so we can take stuff out of it and make little zombie tokens. This thing, we can recur it in other ways, get more value off it, keep ramping. I like it. It'd be great in this deck. And the spiciness about Oro used to be like 40 bucks. And because he's been reprinted a few times, he got reprinted in that Duskmourn precon, and now he's only 4 bucks. Oro, you can get a real Oro instead of a fucking proxy. I am so glad that this card isn't $40 anymore. That made me so sad. Because I was like, what? It's just like a value piece. I don't know. It's a great card. People are excited about it. Great suggestion. Your bearded beauty has returned. Thank you, Rojira. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. You got any cards for our Tevel, the Balanced Scale Graveyard Recursion deck? I feel like this thing might secretly be a zombie tribal deck. Frost Ace wants us to run that Desecrated Tomb. Desecrated Tomb is a cool card. I run it. I love graveyard strategies. Desecrated Tomb is a 3-drop that says whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, you make a little bat flyer. This thing's cool. We need flyers. Sometimes the difference between us winning and losing a commander game is 1 flying blocker. This thing will make flying blockers instead of having to block with our flying commander. I might not be a spelunking truther, but I am a flying blocker truther. You need to have at least 1 or 2 cards that fly. Cryptcaller Chariot. Cryptcaller Chariot. This thing came out in Aether Drift. It's a 4-drop. It's a black 4-drop vehicle, 5/5 with Menace, with Crew 2, and whenever you discard 1 or more cards, you create that many tapped 2/2 zombie creature tokens. Gosh, Wizards are being so cruel with their tapped tokens. Like, these cards are so almost amazing if it wasn't for, like, the tapped nature of the tokens. It's cool. It's playable. It's 80 cents. It's got some mean pussies on it. It's got Crew 2. It's a menacey creature. It makes zombies. Yeah. And it can make multiple zombies. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, create that many tapped 2/2 zombies. That's perfectly fine, y'all. I'm not sure if I would quite run this in a Tevel deck, but I have a Dimir Rona deck that's built around the looting mechanic to draw a card and discard a card. I'm going to run this all day in that deck. Any deck that's discarding things, this is going to make you an army all by itself. And like we were talking about that Head Shredder a few cards ago, we don't need to be crewing and attacking with this nonsense. We can just let it hang out on the battlefield for value. And you only need 1 of the zombies to crew it. Pretty good. Pretty good. Set Croson Protector. Satan Croson Protector. Thank you, Stank Boy, so much for the spell check. This is Satan Croson Protector. He's 3 green pips. He's a 2/2. He's a creature. He's a Centaur Druid Legend. He has an activated ability. Tap an untapped Druid you control. Add green. Let's talk about it. We actually have a few relevant creature types in our Tevil deck because he doesn't just make zombies. The zombies are druids. And this thing turns all our druids into dorks. And even because of the way Seton's worded, Seton lets us tap our zombies for mana on the turn the zombies enter. Because we're not activating the zombies don't need to have haste to make mana with Seton, because Seton's ability is what's tapping them to create the mana. So we can tap our zombies as though they had haste to make green mana with Seton. This is an excellent include. Excellent. Thank you, Stank Boy. Thank you, Stank Boy, for the spell check as well. Very MVP tonight. Oh, right. Oh, I just realized it's kind of a reference to Essica's Chariot. Essica's Chariot. Is Essica's Chariot? Yeah, we can run Essica's Chariot. Essica's Chariot is a 4-drop. It's green. It's a legendary vehicle. Originally came out in Kaldheim, I want to say. This is the Bloomborough Precon reprint. This 4/4 Crew 4 vehicle enters the battlefield, and we make 2/2/2 cats. They are the Norse, very hairy mountain forest cats. And whenever this thing attacks, you create a token that's a copy of target token you control. That's pretty good. We could crew up our chariot with our 2 cats, because this thing is a crew 4 that's a little not as well cost as the head shredder, or the other thing we saw earlier. Yeah, very cool. Also, it's only $1, and also you can have the Pussy Mobile. Look how comfortable that one is. That one's just sleeping. It doesn't care that it's attacking. Oh, right. Cryptolith Right. Jordan wants us to run the Cryptolith Right. Cryptolith Right is a very cool card. Great little value ramp piece in a commander deck. A little bit... Oh, shit! I am so glad this thing is another card that used to be hella expensive. This thing used to be around $60 at one point. It's an aggressively costed 2-drop mono green enchantment that lets your creatures tap for any color of mana. It is so good. If we have a bunch of tokens, we can tap them for mana. It makes so much mana, guys, especially if you have a wide board. I imagine we're going to have a pretty wide board because our commander itself makes tokens, and we're going to be making stuff leave the graveyard all the time. We can tap those tokens for mana, do even bonkers or stuff. Very cool suggestion. Hey, Ross, how's it going? Hogak. Oh, God, Hogak. If y'all are a fan of video essays, y'all should check out Ristic Studies on YouTube. He has like an hour-long video essay that's so, like, the production value on his videos is crazy good. Please check it out. He talks about how Hogak broke Modern. This is a 7-mana Golgari legendary avatar 8/8, and you can't spend mana to cast Hogak because he has Convoke and Delve, meaning that each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1, and each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1, and each card you exile from your graveyard pays for 1 as well. You may cast Hogak from your graveyard. It's a tramply 8/8. He's Hogak. He broke a format. He's cool. I'm not a Modern player. I don't know how this destroyed the Modern environment. That's not me. I'm strictly a casual commander person. This thing's very cool. And my favorite frame in Magic the Gathering is the hybrid mana frame. You see how half of it is green, half of it is black. That's just my favorite frame, and that's just a fun fact about me and my opinions. Next we got, for our suggestion, we got the 6th Doctor. The 6th Doctor, and we got a funny laughing face from Zap Xander 47, the 6th Doctor. He's a 6-mana, 6th Doctor, 3/3 legendary Time Lord Doctor. And whenever you cast a historic spell, you copy it. Except the copy isn't legendary. This ability triggers only once each turn. This thing's very cool. I've actually played with this card. I have a Doctor Who Precon. It's okay. This thing is great at making copies. It's great at making copies of our commander if we get it onto the battlefield first. It makes copies. It's a Simic 6-mana make copy. British person. And also he's got a very gay outfit. I shouldn't talk down on the gay outfit. That's a lot. All right. What else we got? We got a giant ankhead. So Possum wants us to run that giant ankhead. If you have a phobia against insects, now is the time to leave. Because I'm pretty sure this is a, like somewhat gnarly. Nope, it's not, it's an insect. It's a 8 mana green 8/8 that came out in Baldur's Gate. It's 40 cents. It's a trample 8/8 with Ward 2. And other creatures you control have trample and Ward 2. This thing is a house. If you are doing a Creatures Matter build, this thing gives you board-wide trample and board-wide ward, and it's only 40 cents. It's 8 mana, it's a relevant body, and it gives your whole board trample. This feels like a relevant top end for a budget creature deck. At 40 cents, this thing's pretty great. Also, he really likes sheep. Thank you, Colby, so much for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer. On lives, we do community deck building or live deck building. We are looking at Tevil from the Tarkir spoilers that we saw last week. This guy's coming out at some point during the year. I don't know when. But we're going to pull up this Lifecraft engine we got suggested. Lifecraft engine, I'm pretty sure came out in the Aether Drift set that came out like a week or two ago. If you want to suggest any cards for our Tevil deck, please put them in the comments. If you see your card over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. And if you want to see what other people would run in Tevil, check out the Moxfield deck list on the Moxfield link in TikTok in the link tree. Thanks for hanging out. This is Lifecraft Engine. It's a 3-drop colorless 50-cent 4/4 vehicle crew 3. As this vehicle enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. We got some relevant creature types in regards to our pal Tevil tonight. He makes zombies. He could just be a zombie commander in Sultai. That's pretty spicy. So I'm going to say we're going to talk about this in a zombie respect. So we're going to choose zombie. Vehicles and creatures you control are the chosen type. Or no, vehicle creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their types. Each creature you control of the chosen type other than this vehicle gets +1/+1. Okay, cool. So even if we're not crewing this thing, even if we're not attacking with it, it's still going to give our zombies +1/+1 for a colorless 3 mana. It itself can become a 4/4 for crew 3, and that's pretty good too. It giving the Anthem of +1/+1 will make us able to crew this thing with a singular zombie because it's going to make our zombies 3/3s. That feels really good. Thank you for the suggestion. Also, it's only 50 cents. Hell yeah. Eternal Skylord. The Eternal Skylord. Oh, shit. This thing got spoiled recently too, right? The Eternal Skylord. Did it get... I don't remember. I know we saw a crazy-ass dragon recently. The Eternal Skylord. Eternal Skylord. Or is Eternal Skylord the zombie thing that gives zombie creature tokens? Yeah, this thing gives zombie creature tokens flying. Zombie tokens you control have flying. When this thing enters the battlefield, we amass zombies too. Oh, that's why that came on the screen. Okay, that's why I was having trouble typing it. All right. Yeah, it gives our zombie tokens flying. We're going to be making a bunch of zombie tokens. This thing's a creature. We have seen quite a few things in the deck list that cares about having creatures in the graveyard. This thing is going to be a perfectly target to be milled accidentally into our graveyard, get a little bit of value off it. It's a creature, which means that we're going to have an easy time removing it from the graveyard to get some Tevil triggers. Very cool. Yeah, Baddest312, we did talk about Seton. Seton's amazing because Tevil makes druid creature tokens in addition to them being zombies, and Seton is a legendary creature that lets us tap druids for green mana, and because Seton has the ability, he lets us tap our zombie druid tokens as though they had haste. This is Sidisi, Brood Tyrant. We talked about this card a while ago. It is so similar to our commander. And I imagine it's very similar to our commander because in the lore, these guys are from the same plane. They're just from alternate timelines. Sidisi is a 4-drop in the Sultai colors. It's a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, we mill 3 cards. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, you make a 2/2 zombie creature token. Very cool. These guys want to be in each other's decks. They'd be great includes in each other's decks. Excuse me. They both make zombies. So good. So good. Yeah, it does ignore Summoning Sickness because Seton is the one with the ability. Kiki's the badass! If y'all need some graphic designs, please check out my friend Kiki's the badass. Zombies, Landfall, let's go. Hell yeah, Kiki, we're doing some graveyard ramp today. Oh shit, we got Wilhelt the Rock Cleaver was suggested by Zombie over on Twitch. Let's talk about Wilhelt. Wilhelt simply is like the zombie commander these days. He is so good. He's a 4-drop. Holy snap. Okay. This guy has his own precon, and it's very strange for a precon commander to be this expensive in the modern day. This thing's less than 5 years old, and they're printing precons like crazy. This thing says whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. So it makes zombies. It itself is a zombie, great in a zombie tribal deck. 10 times greater if he's the commander of a zombie tribal deck. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do sacrifice a zombie, you get to draw a card. Zombie decks are notorious for treating their treating their creatures as disposable. Zombies are kind of synonymous within aristocrat strategies. Aristocrat strategy is a deck or a type that wants to sacrifice its own creatures or its own permanents for value. Wilhelt's great at that. He does it for card draw at the end step. What? I'm getting a notification that I'm idle on TikTok. I don't know what that's about. Okay. If I get disconnected on TikTok, I am so sorry, guys. Growing Rights of Itlamok. Growing Rights of Itlamok is a very cool card. It's a very value-y card. It's very splashy, and we're going to talk about why in a moment. It's a 3-drop legendary enchantment that when it enters, we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We can pick a creature to put into our hand from among the 4, but if we see an end step and we got 4 more creatures, 4 more creatures, it turns into this thing colloquially known as Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle is like several $100s. It's a land that taps for green equal to the amount of creatures you control, and this thing does that. But this thing's a little bit better than Gaia's Cradle, because if you ain't got no creatures, your Gaia's Cradle doesn't tap for anything. So this thing taps for mana even if you ain't got creatures, and that's why you gotta work for it, by meeting the conditions of the enchantment. It's great. That's why it's $6, even though this thing has seen, I think, 1 or 2 reprints. Pact of the Serpent. Pact of the Serpent, suggested by Ross over on Twitch, wants us to run the Pact of the Serpent. I'm not familiar with Pact of the Serpent. What the hell is a Pact of the Serpent? Okay, this thing's new. This thing was printed in the Vampire Precon for the Caverns of Ixalan. It's a 3-mana black sorcery. Choose a creature type. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the amount of creatures they control of the chosen type. This thing's very cool, and this thing actually has dual functionalities. If your opponent is playing a tribal deck and they're at a low life total, you can kill them with this thing, because it says choose a creature type, target player. It doesn't have to be us. If we want to, like, let's say someone has, I don't know, rabbits is a very popular creature type to have an abundance of recently because of that heir apparent thing that came out in Bloomborough. You can name rabbits, and you can probably kill the rabbit player outright with this little 3-mana black sorcery. How silly would that be? Or slivers. Oh my god. Imagine how satisfying this would be to do to the sliver player. It was a lag. I'm sorry about the lag on TikTok, guys. You gotta bring some crap back from the graveyard if you're feral. Yeah. Zombies are the new goblins. Nyx Bloom Ancient. Nyx Bloom Ancient is a crazy card. It's like $40. It's 7 mana. It's an enchantment creature. It's actually $45. And this thing triples your mana output. It's a 7-drop, tramply 5/5 elemental. If you would tap a permanent for mana, it produces triple the mana instead. It's crazy. It works on your rocks, your lands, your creatures, your enchantments. It works on every permanent that's making mana. It's insane. And, like, it works on a bounce land, too. So if you got, like, a Temple of the False God, you got yourself some bounce lands that taps for 2 mana. This thing will make it tap for 6, because it specifically says 3 times that much mana instead. If you have a way to make your lands tap for multiple mana, you could Fibonacci out and make enough mana to end the game with your Nyxborn Ancient. It is a crazy card, and that's why it's $45. If you'd like to play test it before committing 45 American dollars to this Nyxborn Ancient, I'd recommend a Printing Proxies from printingproxies.com. Oh, man. Ashnod's Altar is rad. Ashnod's Altar, the poor man's Phyrexian Altar, or the Walmart Altar, as I like to call it. It's a little 3-drop rock. It's $11. instead of 40 for the Phyrexian one, this thing, you can instant speed sacrifice a creature, and you make 2 colorless mana. It's great. It's really great for that instant speed sacrifice a creature. We talked a few minutes ago about aristocrat strategies and how they want to sacrifice their own things. Excuse me. This thing is an instant speed sacrifice outlet with an upside to get 2 generic mana every time you sacrifice something to it. It's so good. I love it in my Locust God deck. Master Biomancer. Master Biomancer. Master Biomancer. Master Biomancer is a 4-drop. It's a Simic card. It's a $1.50. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it, where X is this thing's power, right? Yeah, it enters with additional +1/+1 counters equal to Master Biomancer's power, and it also is now a mutant. We could be... It just makes your creatures bigger when they enter. It's pretty good. If you have a way to slam counters onto this thing and just make it big, it's going to make your creatures game-ending when they enter, and the counters aren't going to go away. It's so good. It kind of reminds me of old school Commander. I don't see this card a lot anymore, and it used to be really popular, especially around the time that Atraxa, the OG Atraxa, came out. It was actually in the OG Atraxa Precon. Lich Knight's Conquest. You want us to run that Lich Knight's Conquest? Curtis Haas wants us to run that Lich Knight's Conquest. I almost said Bitch Knight's Conquest. It's a 5-drop mono black $2 sorcery from the Wilds of Eldraine expansion at the beginning of 2024. This thing says sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens. Return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. This thing's very cool. So when I looked at our friend Tevel over here, I was looking at his second little triggered ability, and I kind of wanted to lean away from mass recursion, because mass recursion means less zombies. But this thing, because it's recurring significant creatures, I feel like we should run this thing. Also, if we're already winning, if we already have a bunch of zombies, this thing can probably just get us to win the game outright. Especially, yeah, it's good. It's a mass recursion spell. And even if you're not recurring every single thing out of your graveyard, if you're recurring 2 or 3 targets, you're probably recurring enough to have a significant board presence and probably become the threat as soon as this thing resolves. Also, you can sacrifice enchantments, which is fun. Suggest me a good mono black command. Oh, that's easy. Endrick Sar. I like Endrick Sar. Master Breeder. He's a 5-drop. Endrick Sar, Master Breeder. Yeah, he also got a reprint from Commander Masters. That's cool. He had some fugly-ass art before the reprint, y'all. He is a 5-mana legendary human wizard tutu. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you make X/1/1 black thrall creature tokens, where X is that spell's mana value. When you control 7 or more thralls, you sacrifice Endrick Sar. Endrick Sar is like a mono-black aristocrat's master. Endrick Sar decks use the thralls immediately because they don't want to have a bunch of creatures, because when they have a bunch of creatures, they gotta sacrifice their commander. So they're trying to sacrifice these things as soon as they enter for value, probably off like that Scry instant speed sack outlet or the Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar. Anyway, he's not trying to have his thralls stick around. He's trying to use the thralls for value and pull other things out of the graveyard or do other crazy shenanigans. I think Endrick Sar is really fun. Thrall tokens are hard to come by, so you can make your own Thrall tokens, and you can make them like internet memes. I've made internet meme tokens before, and it's super fun, and it adds a level of whimsy and levity to a commander game. So if you want a mono black commander, I'd recommend Endrick Sar. Thank you so much for Gunnar! I love flirting with you, Gunnar. I'm like, is Gunnar gonna show up tonight so I can tell him how pretty his beard looks? Badlands Revival. Gunnar wants us to run this Badlands Revival. Badlands Revival is not a card I'm familiar with, Gunnar. Okay, we got one of them Thunder Junction cards. This is a little 5-mana sorcery in Golgari colors. It's got one of them cactus people on it with one of them cactus children. This thing says return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. This thing's cool. It's kind of like an Eternal Witness and also a recursion spell. It's a 5-mana recursion spell. It can put something back to our hand. It has to be a permanent spell, so we can't grab another sorcery. That's a little bit of a downside. Yeah, it's cool. It's recursion. That's what we want to do. It can make multiple things leave the graveyard, which is a little bit of a non-both with our commander, because if multiple things leave the graveyard at once, we only still make 1 zombie. But we're definitely making a zombie off this thing, and because it's the mana curve of this thing, so like let's say we have some of our utility pieces that come out in the early game to help fill our graveyard. Our commander comes out, or we wait for the turn after we cast it to attack with our commander to put some stuff in the graveyard off its attack trigger to milk some cards. Then we can cast this thing in our second main phase and start making zombies off our commander and also get value from whatever we're recurring and also putting into our hand. Thank you for the suggestion, Gunnar. It's pretty good. Like, it's not, like, it's like a responsible card, you know? Like, it's not super flashy. You put something from the graveyard onto the battlefield and you put something in your hand for 5 mana at sorcery speed. It feels very fair to me. It feels very fair. Good suggestion, dude. Life of the... Is it Life from... I think it's Life from the Loam, but Life from the Loam... Okay, this is where things start to change. If you're running Life from the Loam in a recursion deck, or in a deck that cares about filling its graveyard, it feels like a game changer in that strategy. Life of the Loam is a 2-drop mono green sorcery. This version, the pretty one's $13. This one got reprinted in the Ravnica Remastered expansion, this art version. You return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and then it's got Dredge. Let's see if we have reminder text for Dredge. Dredge 3 means that if you would draw a card, you may instead mill 3 cards instead. So milling 3 cards in a deck that you want to fill your graveyard is so insanely good. Dredge as a mechanic is broken because Dredge treats Dredge, the keyword, as a payment, like as a cost. But when you break Dredge, Dredge is the incentive. Dredge is what you actually want to do. So you can keep casting this thing, keep putting it in your graveyard, and then instead of drawing a card, it's probably more useful to have 3 cards hit your graveyard in a deck like Tevel. So in a way, I don't know. Graveyard decks treat their graveyards like their hand, and this thing can function to say, it kind of feels like it make your deck functionally say, draw 3 cards instead of 1 at the beginning of your upkeep, or at the beginning of your turn. It's complicated, I don't play with it a lot, but it is a bonkers-ass broken card in the right deck. Amzu, I like Amzu. So I pull out cards in case it's like a slow night and we don't have a popular commander and people aren't suggesting cards. So I pulled out Amzu for tonight. I opened one in Aether Drift. Wait, which is Amzu? There's multiple Amzus. Amzu Swarm's Hunger. I'm not talking about Swarm's Hunger, I'm talking about the other one. Amzu Swarm's Hunger is a 5-drop Golgari Insect Shaman 3/3. Flying menacing creature. Other insects you control have menace, and whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you make a little 1/1 black and green insect creature token, and then you put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among those cards. I like this thing a lot. This thing feels like a lot like our commander without the support of helping us fill our graveyard. It also cares about the insect type. It's cool. It also makes insects. We are seeing a lot of relevant creature types in our Tevel deck tech tonight, y'all. Like, zombies are obviously a relevant creature type because we're making zombie tokens, but also because of that Seton thing, druids are also a relevant creature type, and we have seen quite a few bits of insect support because they're so good at filling the graveyard and getting value out of it. Mikaeus the Unhallowed. Mikaeus the Unhallowed from Rogira over on Twitch. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Please, oh my god. Why is Mikaeus spelled like that? Oh my, okay. A-E-U-S. Oh, please be. Thank you so much for spelling this correctly, Rogira. Thank you. Mikaeus the Unhallowed is a 6-mana zombie cleric 5/5 with Intimidate. Let's see what Intimidate means. Intimidate means that this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or creatures that share a color with it. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. Other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. This thing's cool. It's going to make everything a little bit bigger. Humans is not a relevant creature type for us tonight. This thing's gonna make our zombies into 3/3s off the rip. We've seen also a few vehicles tonight, and making our zombies bigger is gonna help crew those vehicles. This thing's very cool. It is $15. It's also a zombie, which is a relevant creature type for us tonight. Oh my god. Okay, so Kiki the badass. I was this close to doing Sin, the Final Fantasy spoiler, instead of Tevil. But then I thought about it and I looked at both of them really hard and I'm like, which one? Because like they're both coming out this year, right? Like, and I imagine this one's gonna be a pre-con. Sin, oh god, Sin, Spiros, yeah. Sin is like the big bad, like natural disaster creature of Final Fantasy X. I didn't play Final Fantasy X, but I love video essays about Final Fantasy X. This thing is a 7-mana Leviathan Avatar 7/7 flyer. When this thing enters or attacks, exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random, then create a tapped token that's a copy of that card. If the exile card's on land, do it again. It is so good. I don't know. I want to have Sin as a commander. Sin feels like a really cool recursion commander. He does it randomly, so he's not super good in my opinion, but he just looks super fun. That repeating the process, so you're going to be ramping off him too. He's 7 mana though. So when I compared Sin to Tevil, I'm like, which deck would I actually keep together and play? And I decided for Tevil, because having a 4-mana commander is probably just going to let you have a better time than having a 7-mana commander, especially if people are trying to remove your 7-mana commander, because it's kind of big and it's going to deal commander damage. Yeah, so that's Sin. They're both recursion pieces. They want to be in each other's decks. They want to be best friends. And I'm excited about both of these cards. This one's coming out in the Final Fantasy expansion, and this one's coming out in the Tarkir expansion. They're both coming out this year. I don't know when either of those sets are coming out. Please don't ask me. Games by Gunther, good to see you. You want us to run that Dead Bridge Chant. Dead Bridge Chant. Okay, so I like Dead Bridge Chant. I love all recursion strategies. But I gotta tell you what, guys, I stopped playing this card. I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. 6 mana, enchantment, Golgari colors. When it enters the battlefield, we mill 10 cards, and at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. After playing with this card for like a year or two, I don't know, for 6 mana, I tell you what, I don't like randomness. I really like to have a higher level of intentionality when I'm playing, so I don't like things that do things randomly, and Dreadbridge Chant is random. And sometimes when you're on the back end of a game and you're already losing, and then you have a whiff off a random trigger, it feels bad, and that's why I stopped playing this card. But notable about how good this card is in graveyard strategies, it mills you for 10 outright, and no matter what, it's either putting something back in your hand or it's slamming something freely directly onto the battlefield. It's cool, it's good, it's let me down too many times for me personally. Thank you for your suggestion, Games by Gunther. Deadpan Face, we have looked at Sidisi a few times. Sidisi is very cool. He is a lot, or Sidisi, Snake Mommy, is a lot like our commander. And that makes a lot of sense, because they're both from the Sultai clan of Tarkir. Games by Gunther, or something, not Games by Gunther. Gunner wants us to run Defossilize. Defossilize, this better be a Jurassic Park card, Gunner. Well, it almost is a Jurassic Park card. Gunner, you like them 5-mana recursion spells in black, don't you, Gunner? I'm starting to get a vibe for your playstyle. This 5-mana black recursion sorcery says return target card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature explores, then explores again. Explore means you reveal the top card of your library, then put that card into your hand if it's a land card. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on the creature and put the card in your graveyard, and then repeat this process. Very cool. Alright guys, since Gunner likes 5-mana recursion sorceries in black so much, who can, I think it's Coiling something. There's a 5-mana black sorcery in Bloomborough that recurs something, but also makes a little offspring token of it. I think it's Coiling something, but I don't know the word. Someone please put it in the chat if you know it. Echoing Equation? You want us to run that Echoing Equation? Ranculus wants us to run the Echoing Equation. Echoing Equation. Echoing Equation suggested by Rankulist. Okay, let's talk about it. I like this card. I saw this card in a bulk box, and I bought it for 25 cents, and I don't regret it. And I think I played it in a deck. I'm not sure which one. The one side, Echoing Equation, is a 5-mana sorcery, the blue side. And this says, choose target creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of it until end of turn, except those creatures aren't legendary. That's hilarious. That is so fucking funny to me. You can turn your board into your commander, and if you mill, or if you take one thing out of the graveyard, pop, zombie army. 10 out of 10. That is so silly. Or making all your zombie, like all your little 2/2 zombies are now suddenly 4/4 flying dragons with attack triggers to mill. Actually, we gotta be careful. If we turn our zombies into dragons, we might accidentally mill our entire deck. This thing's very silly. Let's see what the creature side does. So on the other side, we have a 3/3 Trampler for 3. And as long as you control 8 or more lands, it's an 8/8 for 3 mana. This is a perfectly playable ass card. I like it. It's really good. It's either a 3 mana Trampley 8/8, or you turn your board into your spiciest boys. And it ignores the legendary rule. This is actually really good. Thank you for the suggestion. I do like that card. I'm really glad it's cheap too. This thing is only 50 cents. So it's either a Trampley 8/8 for 3 mana, or you turn your board into your best thing. Even if it's legendary. That's a great card. Great card at 50 cents. Oh, or Demons! 2020, got it! It is Coiling Rebirth. So when it comes to 5 mana 5 mana recursion spells that are taking things out of the graveyard, putting them directly onto the battlefield, this newer one from Bloomborough is my favorite, because it's 50 cents, it's 5 mana, it's in black, so it fits into more decks than the multicolored ones. It also has gifted cards, so you're doing a little interaction on the board, you're doing a little happy group huggy commander action of giving somebody a card, but when you give them that card, the thing you're recurring, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then it's legendary, you create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1. It is so good. I love Coiling Rebirth. I love that it's 50 cents. The art is a great vibe. I love this card. I think you should play this card. Thank you, chat, for helping, for finding the name. I knew it was Coiling something. All right, Gunner, you want us to run that Grave Betrayal? Grave Betrayal. Grave Betrayal is, oh snap. Oh, this thing. People get poopy about this card. All right, so we got ourselves a little $6 mono black 7-drop enchantment. This thing says whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. This thing's cool. This thing is very fun to play around. I like this card. It changes the way that people interact with the game. It changes the way people attack. It gets people talking at the table, and I kind of like that. Also, it's worded so that you can interact with it really easily. Because the way the trigger works, blah, 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 you exile the thing, and additional +1/+1 counter. You're putting the things down at the beginning of the next end step. They're not getting them at instant speed when they die. So you can get rid of it when they die. You can interact with the Grave Betrayal before they get the free creatures onto the battlefield with the +1/+1 counter. This card feels very fair to me. Thank you, Gunner, for the suggestion. Ooh, Dream Demon wants us to run that Genesis. Genesis is not a card I'm familiar with. Genesis. 5 mana incarnation 4/4 green creature. Gives us an upkeep trigger. If Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 3 mana. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Honestly, 10 out of 10. Let's talk about it. So it is unfortunate. It's not... This feels fair, right? So you want to mill this card. You don't want this card in your hand. If it's in your hand, you want to put it into the graveyard because that's when it actually does things, right? Notable about this thing, when we get this triggered and we pay for it, we're going to make a zombie if our commander's on the battlefield, so I feel like that's the real reason we're running this thing. Yeah, it's cool. It'll help us make zombies, and if we accidentally mill something we'd rather have in our hand, or maybe we need to have in our hand, this thing can put it back for a 3 mana, and it'll trigger our commander to make a little zombie druid. Pretty good. I like it. And it's only $1. All right, Ross, you want us to run that Molt Tender? The Molt Tender. Molt Tender. Molt Tender is... Oh, I like this! I opened one of these. When I was looking at cards to put in this deck. Did I pick this one out? No, but I do have it in my recursion deck. I recently built the Mimeoplasm that got printed in Aether Drift, and I opened this thing in it, and it has it in this. This Molt Tender is a 1-mana insect druid in green with 2 activated abilities. You can tap it to mill a card, or you can tap it to exile a card from your graveyard, add 1 mana of any color. It itself is a 1/1 little insect druid. We saw Amzu earlier. Amzu is a little Golgari insect commander that also got a new version printed in the Aether Drift expansion, and it's really cool. We secretly have some insect synergies in our little Tevil deck. Tevil is all about everybody. Tevil's very inclusive. We care about zombies, we care about druids, we care about insects. I think there was Mikaeus the Unhallowed that cares about humans, but killing them. Very cool. There's a lot going on. This is very cool. I really like this little piece of game design on Tevil. Very fun. Feign Death. You want us to run that Feign Death? You want us to Feign Death, Gunner? Feign Death is a 1-mana black instant that came out in the D&D expansion. It's $1.50 for a 1-mana common instant. This thing says until end of turn, target creature gains when this creature dies. Return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Very cool. I like this thing a lot. So this thing could, I imagine it would be very powerful in an aristocrat strategy where you want to be sacrificing creatures, because this thing will just plop it right back down onto the battlefield. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped. Yeah, so this thing will also cause something to leave your graveyard because you're returning it to the battlefield tapped after it hits the graveyard. You'll also get a Tevil trigger to make a little 2/2 zombie druid. Very cool. Also, you're going to get your thing back after your friends tried to get it. I like that a lot. It also makes your creature a little bit bigger with a +1/+1 counter if we care about that creature being spicy and impactful. Ooh, Kiki wants us to run that Sir Conrad. I love Sir Conrad. I have 6 copies of Sir Conrad, and I'm pretty sure like all of them are played. It's a 5-mana legendary 5/4 human knight. It's an uncommon legendary that came out in the first Eldraine expansion. This thing says that whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. He also has an activated ability where we can pay 1 in a black, and we can have each player mill a card. I love Sir Conrad. Sir Conrad ends games. If there's a board wipe or a mass recursion spell while Sir Conrad's on the battlefield, that game, like that moment, if the table isn't wiped, somebody's probably gonna be leaving that game. Sir Conrad's so good. He's seen a couple prints. This one got reprinted in the, I want to say this one's from the Tarmogoyf deck from the Modern Horizons 3 expansion. The modern set had Commander precons. I don't know why. Yeah, that's Sir Conrad. Great suggestion, Kiki. Very good. Urvolg Lurgoyf. It's a Lurgoyf. The Lurgoyf are the Goyfs. Oh god, please be spelled right. I think I want to say it's Urborg. It's probably Urborg Lurgoyf. Urborg Lurgoyf is a black... Okay, well... How the hell do we spell Lurgoyf? L. Please, we know it starts with L. Alright. Urborg Lurgoyf. Please... it's because I put Urborg instead of Urborg. Urborg Lurgoyf. Urborg Lurgoyf. Urborg Lurgoyf is a 2-mana green creature with kicker. This thing, we can kick it for our colors. We can invest a total mana of 4 to get the spiciest possible trigger off our Lurgoyf. When this thing enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. That's really important. We need to get cards into our graveyard to take cards out of it so we can get zombies off our Tevil triggers. And this thing will do it if we kick our Lurgoyf. And when the Urborg Lurgoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to the number +1. Thank you very much, Patrick Ramsey 644 for the follow. I appreciate it. I am BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and I use green screen effects and silly little graphics to make Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. Thank you for hanging out with me. On live, we do live deck building. We have been going for an hour, so we are going to take a few more cards before we call it a night. If you want to suggest any cards for the commander on any of my other lives, if you see your card over here, after you put your suggestion in the comments, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list if I talk about it over here. Necrotic Ooze? Yeah, I think that was Necrotic Ooze. Necrotic Ooze is going to be our number 5 for tonight. And this thing's cool. It's a 4-drop, 4/3 Ooze from the Mirrodin block. It's $3, and as long as Necrotic Ooze is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities. Excuse me, it has all activated abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards. Activated abilities are things that have a colon, not a semicolon like I've been saying incorrectly for months. A colon is the 2 dots. That difference is the difference between a cost and an effect. This thing is going to have all of those. That's pretty good. So anything that like taps for mana, like a creature that taps to draw, make a mana, or to draw a card and discard a card, that's an activated ability, and this Ooze is going to have all those activated abilities. Very cool. That's our number 5. If you guys want to see any of the cards, Crowded Crypt will be on number 5. If you guys want to see any of the cards that we talked about tonight, you can check out the Moxfield page. That is in the link tree on the TikTok. Thank you for hanging out with me. I love Crowded Crypt. I love this card. I bought 4 versions of this card. I have never once remembered the trigger on this card. Never once have I put a singular counter on this card. Not because it wasn't triggering, just because I forget every single time. I don't know what's wrong with me in this card, but I will never remember to put a counter on it. Maybe because like I've just conditioned myself to just be like, that's a rock. The rack taps for mana and does nothing else. And so I never remember to put counters on it. It's a 3-drop black rock, and it's amazing. It taps for black mana, and whenever a creature you control dies, you put a corpse counter on it. You can activate it for 6 mana, and you make a bunch of 2/2 black zombie creature tokens by sacrificing this thing equal to the amount of corpse counters on it. I love this card, in theory. I have never once activated the 6 mana ability. I have never once remembered to put a counter on this thing. But I am so jazzed about it, and I want you to play it, even though I've been playing it wrong for like a year or 2. I really like that card. Dimir Strandcatcher. The Dimir Strandcatcher is going to be our number 3. Dimir Strandcatcher is not a card I'm familiar with. Okay, we love a hybrid border. We love the hybrid mana border. All right. It's 4 mana. It's a fairy rogue. It flies. It's a 3/3. This thing says whenever you attack, you surveil X, where X is the number of opponents being attacked. That's going to be pretty easy because we're going to have a bunch of tokens. And surveil means that we get to look at the top cover of our library. We can choose to keep it on the top of our library or put it in our graveyard. And at the beginning of each end step, not just our end step, everybody's end step, if there are more cards, if 3 or more cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn other than the battlefield, draw a card. This thing's cool. This thing's great. This thing is great. We are, okay. Yeah. So if we can mail on other people's turns, we're going to be drawing cards. When we attack, instead of just filling the graveyard with our commander's triggers, this thing we can surveil cards into the graveyard. And if we decide we want a card to stay on top so we can draw it, we can do it with this thing. Very cool card. Good suggestion. That's our number 3 pick, is this Dimir Strandcatcher. This little fairy rogue. Very cool. And we love the hybrid mana border. All right, our number 2 is going to be Dream Demon with Vigor. Vigor is a little bit of a feel-bad card for me, personally. Vigor felt like a very unfair card when I first started playing Magic the Gathering. Like, this is a card that made me go, this is bullshit! Like, Vigor is a 6-mana mono-green incarnation 6/6 with trample. And if damage would be dealt to a creature you control, other than Vigor, prevent that damage. So your creatures are now protected from damage. It's not just combat damage either. Like, it'll protect them from Blasphemous Act or like board-wide damage effects. And instead of taking damage, they just get bigger. They get fuck tons of +1/+1 counters, especially if you're doing chunks of damage to them with a Blasphemous Act. If you Blasphemous Act someone with a Vigor and a board, they're gonna win the game. And when Vigor is put into a graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle into its owner's library. I think this card is very feel-badsy. It's a hardcore card. Like, I don't... It's undeniably very good,
and I play with it myself. I am part of the problem. But it is not a very fun card to play against, because if you don't have removal, if you don't have a way to remove it, and your deck is all combat all the time, you're just going to lose that game in a very unfun way, in my experience. But this card is so good. That's probably why it's 24 American dollars. Spaceman. Yarick is crazy. We've built Yarick on live before. Yarick the Desecrated. Thank you. Or Demons 2020, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Our number 2 pick tonight is Yarick the Desecrated, the ETB Commander King. This Sultai 5-drop says if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability you control to trigger, it triggers again. It also is the death-touching life-linking 4-3. Excuse me, 4-5. It's great. You're getting double ETBs. So anytime something says whenever this thing enters the battlefield or enters, you're going to do that thing twice. So if something said, like, enter the battlefield, search your library for a basic opponent on the battlefield, you're getting it twice. Yarick is just doubling season the deck, because the way Yarick is built, you're going to be giving stuff flash, you're going to be at instant speed blinking things so they enter the battlefield again. Yarick is a hardcore deck. Yarick's real good. That is our number 2. And our last suggestion of the night. Thank you, Gunner. I really thank you so much for subbing to my Patreon, Gunner. I really appreciate it. If anyone joins my Patreon as a free member, your name gets in the credits in white. If you join as a paid member, you get higher graphics with your name appearing in the credits of all my videos. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for mentioning it, Gunner. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Gunner. That's ending the night on a high, and let's not do that. Let's get really sweaty and talk about Toxrill. It's not a secret. I hate Toxrill. I've made, like, at least one video about how much I hate Toxrill. Toxrill is a board wipe that just keeps happening. Toxrill is a continuous board wipe. It's a 7-mana legendary black slug horror. It's actually a Dimir commander because it's got blue in its text box on its activated ability. 7/7 at the beginning of each end step. Not just your end step, everybody's end step. We put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And whenever a creature you don't control with the slime counter on it dies, we make a little 1/1 slug. And what are we going to do with those slugs? We're going to sack them for 2 mana apiece to draw cards off the Sacrifice a Slug activated ability. Toxrill, in my experience, is never the commander experience I'm looking for. Personally, I don't think this card is fun. Personally, I'm not telling you guys how to play, but it is my show, and I'm going to tell you not to do this to your friends, please. If you're doing casual commander, if you guys are like CDH crowd, absolutely, do whatever you all gotta do to each other. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of Toxrill. Toxrill is not just like a feel bad card, it's an insanely good card. This thing is $25 because Toxrill is just so good. It is so good. It keeps your opponent's boards empty. It fills your board with slugs. It has card draw built into it off the slugs. So you're pretty much, like, when your opponent's creature dies and it pops into a slug under your control, it's like you're drinking your opponent's tears. When you sacrifice one of your slugs that you made by killing one of your like friends' creatures, you're drinking their tears when you sacrifice that slug to draw a card. Yeah, that's Toxrill. Those are my feelings about him. We're in fact going to keep going because that is a negative note to end the night on. Yeah, thank you, the Nerdcraft Institute, for the follow. I appreciate it. Peer pressure. All right. Well, if we're gonna get sweaty, let's talk about Vorinclex. And end it with Vorinclex. All right, let's talk about Vorinclex. All right. God damn, I hate that. All right. Vorinclex is an 8-mana creature. It says that whenever your opponent taps a land, it doesn't untap. It's like it's putting a stun counter on it. So you have to wait 2 turns to untap your lands, and it makes your lands tap for double. Moxfield automatically makes Praetors, which are the Phyrexian legendaries, show up as Phyrexian art, and that's why this is like that. But you know what else Moxfield does? If you can't read the text on a card for some reason, it puts the rules text down below for you. And they just want to be so cheeky that they put it in Phyrexian as well, and I haven't figured out how to look up the English version, and I'm not going to do it tonight. So we're going to do one more card. Just made a Sultai zombie deck on MTGLA. Thank you. That's cool. All right. Vadal, tell me about your zombie deck. Who's your commander for your... Well, are you even... Do you have a commander on the format you're running on Arena? One for the road, God Eternal... Alright, God Eternal Bantu. There we go. God Eternal Bantu is not a card that makes people want to flip tables. God Eternal Bantu is very fair. It's a 5-drop creature. It's a zombie god with menace. It's a 5/6. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of other permanents and then draw that many cards. We're probably going to be sacrificing a bunch of zombies or maybe some stuff that has some death triggers for some spice. And when this thing dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. Very cool. It's a little value-y creature. It's $5. It was printed in the War of the Spark expansion about 8-ish years ago? 6-ish years ago? I don't know. It's cool. It's a little bit of card draw on an ETB trigger. The art goes hard. It's like a skeletal crocodile. It's based on the Bantu character from the Amonkhet expansion, but what happens to them after they, Yeah. Alright, guys. For the last time tonight, I am BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. I use video editing effects and graphics to make silly little MTG content all over the internet. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. We put some cards together for Tevel the Balanced Scale. If you want to see any of the viewer suggestions for our Graveyard Recursion spoiled Tarkir precon that we're going to see later this year, please check out the Moxfield link that is in the link tree. If you want to hang out with me on the Bigger Gayer Discord, the Discord is also in the link tree. And thank you, Gunnar, for plugging the Patreon during the stream. The Patreon is also there if you'd like to help me fulfill my dream of making joyous art. Or if you want to join for free and get your name in the credits, you can also do that. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight, and I hope that you all